Hey guys, what's up? Matthew here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. Hey, little car video for you today. I was going to drive around and try to get some fall leaves in the scene for you, for those of you who don't get to have the beautiful Octobers that we do here in Western Pennsylvania. But it didn't work out. Couldn't quite get the shot, so I'm just going to sit here and answer a viewer question related to expository preaching. Now, when I say expository preaching, what I mean is preaching through books of the Bible. And the question specifically is this. This viewer says, I've tried to preach through books of the Bible, but my congregation unfortunately does not have the patience for it. We did about 20 weeks in the book of Revelation, and my congregation started to complain that I was taking too long. So what do I do about that? Okay, well, great question. First of all, let me commiserate with you a little bit. I had the same exact phenomenon happen with me when I started preaching a number of years ago when I was down at Faith in Brooksville. I was really pumped up on John Piper at the time, and John Piper had just done a long series on the book of Romans actually. I'm doing Revelation now. He was doing Romans, and also the Gospel of John. I think he did Romans first and then the Gospel of John. And so I was inspired by the fact that I think Piper put in something like 8 years in Romans or something like that, a ridiculously long time. And not only that, but I was listening to a lot of voices at that time that was telling me this was the only way to do preaching, that this was the best way to move forward. And so I wanted to do likewise. Well, I get into a couple series, and before I know it, one of my elders came to me and said, hey, listen, we've got to speed this series up because you're taking too long to work through the book of Acts. And I was first a little bit abrased by that. I had my feelings hurt a little bit. I wanted to be like John Piper, my mentor. And what I realized is simply that my congregation at that time was just not ready for that kind of exposition. So, viewer who asked me this question, there's a couple of things that you have to do about this. First, you have to create a culture in which biblical exposition is not just accepted, but is expected. And that's going to take a little bit of time. And what you're going to have to do is show them the value of expository preaching by taking them through certain books of the Bible and showing them the worth of why you're doing what you're doing. One of the ways that you show them the worth of what you're doing is by reminding them intentionally that these are the kinds of things that we try to do to keep our ministry faithful. We tackle the text that we wouldn't ordinarily want to tackle. Whenever I come to a text that's particularly difficult, I remind my people, look, we're an expository church. Of course, we're going to handle this. Usually, it's those difficult passages that end up being the most interesting sermons, because what a lot of preachers do is they're just looking for that kind of easy 3-point message that they've done a bunch of times, so people know what's coming. But when you hammer through those really difficult passages, they end up being very interesting sermons. And if you can kind of remind your people why you're doing what you're doing all the time, then I think that's going to be good. That's going to help set a cultural expectation in your church that that's what we do. We're a faithful Bible preaching church, and we have reasons behind what we're doing. Now, the second tip I would give you is probably want to start with some shorter expositions. Okay, you want to establish how to do this. But if you tackle Isaiah as your first book or the Psalms as your first book, you're going to be in that book for a very long time. So why don't you start off with an easy book to do verse by verse? Start off with the book of Jonah. Then after that, move into a book like Philemon or Ephesians or Galatians. Give them the taste, give them the savor, give them the treasure for doing expository preaching. And then by the time when you're really ready to exegete one of the really hard, good, beautiful books like Romans or John or Revelation, then your people will already come to expect that. Now, thankfully, I can say at Gospel Fellowship, I've inherited a congregation that for years and years and years has come to expect expository preaching through books of the Bible. I think my people would probably be upset if I tried to give them some cheaper series on 6 weeks to a happier home or 5 weeks to a better marriage or something like that, because this is what they've come to believe is right and good. And I'm thankful then for my predecessors, both Walter Kenyon and Nick Protos, who came before me. They were expository preachers too. In fact, we have a list, David and I do, of all the books that have been exposited at the church, Gospel Fellowship PCA. And so we're trying to carry on with what our predecessors had done by continuing on new books of the Bible. So eventually, the pastors at Gospel Fellowship will have gone through the whole counsel of God. But keep in mind that's a multi-generational project, okay? That's going to take decades, that's going to take years. And so David and I, we see our role as just carrying the ball forward for another generation. But the best way to do it, man, is just to do it and tell them why you're doing it and tell them that they need it and remind them. And if you get any kickback from your elders or people that you trust, go ahead and pump the brakes a little bit, speed up the series, and try to acclimatize your people to the kind of preaching that they need. And by the way, before I close this out, I just want to say this too. When we talk about biblical exposition through books of the Bible, you can do a subset within a particular book, okay? So I don't see any reason why you couldn't do a series just on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel, or why you couldn't do a series on the Beatitudes, or why you couldn't do Genesis 1 to 11 or something like that. In fact, I have kind of a mind to want to do Genesis 1 to 11 because I've never done that before. So you can do a subsection within a book and do expository verse by verse, paragraph by paragraph preaching in a shorter section. And if that's what helps your people to get used to the idea that this is how preaching works, then go ahead and do that. Do some shorter series, and slowly then you can work your way into those 8-year John Piper series through great books like Romans or Revelation or whatever else you want to do. I think that a year is about right for a particular book. I've not done a 10-year series in any book before. I've heard rumors of a Puritan who spent like 21 years in the book of Leviticus or something like that. But probably most audiences are going to be very well served by doing any one of the books of the Bible in about a year. If you're taking more than that, then I could see where people could get bored and want you to move on a little bit. But then again, you give them as much as they're able to take it. Be faithful, pastor. Keep preaching. Don't let the criticism build up on you, but you do want to listen to your elders because they are probably pretty wise. All right, thanks for checking into this channel. Love you lots. Talk to you later.